Hi, Tim Goldstein here. Here to talk to you about my favorite topic, which is Asperger's and neurodiversity. Well, as you know, me being an Aspie, have a little bit of a concern and interest in this whole Asperger thing and how it's being dealt with in corporate America today. I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about some ideas I had here. So if you don't mind, I'm going to be checking my notes once in a while to see if I can keep myself on topic. But what I wanted to talk about was essentially this idea of normal to Asperger's. And what is neurodiversity? A lot of people don't have any idea what this whole concept of neurodiversity actually is. Well, neurodiversity is the idea that our brains and the way that they work and function all are dependent upon how they're shaped and how they grow and how they're wired in the environments we grew up in. So that our brains vary just as much as the length of our fingers or how big our nose is or how big our ears are, how much our ears stick out. All those things we accept that they can vary all over the place with different people. But for whatever reason, we tend to think that brains all work the same. And that if I think of something one way, you're going to think of a thing the exact same way. And how many times have you had a miscommunication because the person on the other end did not think at all the way that your brain thought? You were thinking one thing, and they were thinking another thing, and it just was not a good scene of how it all played out. So the whole concept really of neurodiversity is that we have this whole range of different ways that the brain can be structured and operate that would all fit within what we would consider normal for humans. Just as we accept that somebody who can be 5 foot tall can be a human, we accept that somebody 6'10" can be a human too. So we have this great big range, and we're just accepting that the person at 6'10" is going to have a difficult time sometimes walking into door frames. On the other hand, we accept that the person at 5 foot is going to have a little bit of challenge every now and then getting that luggage bag from up over that top bin in the airplane. So we take that into accommodation with no problems whatsoever, that physical attributes can change. And as those physical attributes change, that it also causes us to have a different range of capabilities and what you can expect us to be able to do in a given situation. Well, in neurodiversity, we're just taking that exact same idea and we're applying it to our brains now, how our heads work, how they process, how we think. So let me go into that just a little bit more. What the concept of neurodiversity is that as your brain is shaped and worked and processes differently, that you're going to be interpreting and interacting with the world differently. So I happen to have Asperger's, which is a condition that is often characterized by poor social interaction, oftentimes poor communication. So I'm kind of faking you out right now a little bit that those don't happen to be two of the areas that I'm highly impacted in. But it also is characterized by things such as speaking with no filter when the wrong stuff comes out, and guilty as charged on that one. It also is characterized by things such as, in general, higher IQs. You'll often see Asperger's and Asperger-type traits associated with people in the technical fields, the engineers, the computer programmers, the spreadsheet wonks in the finance department. All those type of people tend to have brains that are oriented to left-hand side thinking. And as a left lobe thinking person, they tend to be very logical, very analytical. And that can often be not just that the person learned how to do that, but what if we think of it as the way that their brain is formed and shaped and wired, that is what suits their abilities the best. It'd be a very interesting, different way to look at it. We look at sports teams that way, and we accept that if you want, say, American football, and you want your defensive line, those guys need some pretty big guys in order to get through that offensive line on the other side. That's huge guys just trying to stop you. So we recognize that we're trying to select for different ones of these traits for different particular applications. And very much true when we get to our heads. By selecting using what is it that the skill sets that this set of brain arrangements gives you, how can we accommodate maybe the differences in how you act and react so that we can allow it to fit into our environment while still getting all the best of that inspiration and intelligence and insight you have from your unique perspective as somebody with a different processing, different wired, different working brain, while at the same time making it that we can all get along happily and communicate and recognize that, hey, not all of us are 7 feet tall, and I'm not the world's greatest person to ask about getting something off the top shelf. I am at 5'8". So let me move on here to another little note that I had, and this is really kind of how my brain works. And this gives you an idea of what I'm talking about in neurodiversity. So we're going to deal with an interest. And this happens to be an interest that I got involved with in the late 90s. And what it was is using computers to control and operate various pieces of equipment, with the goal to be operating a bunch of little metalworking equipment. So I'm looking to see if I have any metalworking pieces around here to hold up, but I don't know. Nothing right immediately around me. The idea, though, was I got really just involved with it. And at that point, it was just really moving from being a industrial technology to barely where it was starting to enter into the, I would say, hobbyist to semi-engineer kind of level. And most people would get involved with a particular interest or hobby, and they would start pursuing it, and they'd do some things with it, and they might have somebody and some people telling them that they're obsessed with it because they want to go golfing every weekend or something like that. And that's generally about as far as it goes. It doesn't change their career path and arc. It doesn't change their circle of friends very much. Maybe, pick up a friend, drop off a friend that isn't involved with golf. But for the most part, not a huge impact in life, just this interest that does consume some money and time. So I got involved with CNC, and this interest became all-consuming, which when you have Asperger's, that is very common for your interests to become all-consuming. It becomes everything you want to do, everything you want to talk about, everything you want to be about becomes that interest. They say it's because it makes the dopamine fire in our brains, and it's essentially like we're being on drugs and jacked up and juiced up when we're pursuing this exciting stuff. So I don't know if that's true or not true, but it certainly grabs my brain and gets me excited when I get really wrapped up into one of my special interests. So to bring the story to a quick conclusion, my special interest went on to the point that I kept getting bigger and bigger machines and decided finally that I really wanted a full industrial CNC, which is computer numeric control, machine that is roughly the size of a car and that spits metal out of it at a rate you just wouldn't believe. We're talking big industrial production equipment. So I ended up, because I have Asperger's and this was my special interest and I was into it, on top of my normal job in the computer industry, I started a company, bought 2 pieces of this kind of equipment, and launched into the manufacturing business, knowing nothing more than having run little tiny hobbyist machines that ended up being the kind of things that I made parts for in my manufacturing business. So there's a little example of the level of obsessiveness that somebody with Asperger's can possibly have. And you can see where that obsessiveness can be very, very useful. If we were on a project team together and you were needing somebody to help push to come up with the ideas and how we can make it happen, you probably want somebody like me on the team. On the other hand, if you're the kind of manager who likes things to just kind of go smooth and nobody to question status quo, you probably don't want me on the team, because I'm the kind of guy that is likely to say, why are we still doing that stupid stuff that everybody just takes when they get it on their desk and throw it out anyways? So that's one of the advantages that you have from neurodiversity, is you have another way to look at things. Well, let me move into another little point here. And this has to deal with, when we're dealing with neurodiversity, we're dealing with a number of different syndromes. And primarily we're dealing with one that's referred to as the autism spectrum disorder. So an ASD, autism spectrum disorders. And it's considered a continuum. So on this continuum, we have at one end, we have somebody who is quite high functioning. And at the other end, we have somebody who is low functioning. And by high functioning and low functioning, we're talking about how well can they integrate into society and act independently. So somebody on the high functioning end, it can be quite independent on their own, and probably is the type of people you're already working with, you're working around. It could be your boss, it could be the help desk person, it could be the engineer you deal with, it could be somebody in the accounting department. We're those people that manage to sneak in because we do have enough social and interactional skills to allow us to work in the normal workplace. But we do bring some of those special traits with us that gives us just strength and makes us perform super well in those particular kinds of roles. But oftentimes we're also a little bit of problem children. We don't know when to shut up. We don't know when to keep our tongues bit tight between our teeth and not let some of those words come flying out. We have a number of issues that fall around that area. But point being is, you're often around these kinds of people all the time already, but the thing is, you're not recognizing what it is that makes the person act the way they do. And because nobody has made you familiar with the different idea of neurodiversity and how it really works and functions and fits together into the whole workplace and life, then you're not recognizing that that person likely you could intergage and converse much better with them if you were to understand a little bit more of what their mental environment really looks like. And conversely, if they can understand some of what your mental environment looks like, then they'll be able to converse back much better also. But one of the things that really just kind of drives me crazy on this whole idea is we have the autism spectrum, which goes from, as we said, high functioning, low functioning, and a whole range in between. And that is very much the largest contingent of what we talk about when we talk about neurodiversity. But there's also a number of other conditions and syndromes that would fall underneath the umbrella of being neurodiverse. And that would include things like ADHD, OCD, Tourette syndrome, quite a range of different conditions that are caused by neurological structures and processing that would make you act or react or process or interact differently than what we would consider that baseline normal person. This is never really quite fit for me, that you have this one spectrum for things, but then you have a bunch of these other pieces that can sometimes fit in, and we call all of that neurodiversity. So what finally dawned on me is, I think neurodiversity is not a spectrum like that. I think we're looking at it wrong. to me, it works more as this big fluffy cloud. And inside this big fluffy cloud, there's all these different characteristics and traits that you would associate with just normal people. So let me show you an example, and we'll go through the example a little bit, and I'll try to explain what I'm thinking as far as being a cloud, a different way to look at it. So the way we look at it right now, we have that one line, which would be Asperger's, all the way down to, the highly non-functional end of autism. And then we have these other traits. I think the way it fits a lot better is if you take and look at it from the standpoint of looking at all these different words together. And what these words are these are just different personality attributes. And when you look at just what we're going to call a normal person, so neurotypical, which is kind of an interesting phrase because it doesn't point to anything specific, it's really saying that people that have these range of traits are what we generally consider to be normal. And when you look through them, they do have a variety in their traits. First off, they have lots and lots of different traits at different levels. Oftentimes, there's lots of little ones that can be called upon that trait as they need it. But they also have other traits which are bigger and they are more a large part of who they are and their personality. For instance, in this example we're looking at now, this particular person is reliable, they're sociable, and appreciative. Those look like some of their biggest traits. They're agreeable. And then as you can see, the traits go down to smaller and smaller. Not that they don't have them, but that they're not as predominant in their personality. So to me, the way we have to look at this is, neurodiversity is merely how all those traits are arranged, how many different traits are present, and how big and prevalent which traits are compared to other traits. So let's take a look at the opposite end, because it's real easy to designate one end and the opposite point. The hard part is, when does somebody go from being neurotypical or normal to suddenly being, oh my gosh, they're neurodiverse and they have Asperger's? Well, medically we have cutoff points we use, but realistically I just don't think they fit, and I will show you why I believe that. So we've already gone over the end point for a neurotypical person. As we saw, lots of different small traits in there, along with, into varying degrees, larger and larger traits that are more of a predominant piece of their personality. But overall, very well-balanced personality. The traits are all nice social traits. They'd be a nice person to be around. They're smart, they're tough, a little timid, they're reliable, they're pretty sociable though. Sounds like a nice person. Now, let's go to the opposite end. And we're going to take somebody who I'm going to say is heavy on the Asperger scale and very brilliant and very obsessed. And when we look at it, just looking at the picture, what you can see is, first off, there's a lot less range in the traits that are even present. So this person just doesn't have the set of tools in their toolbox to be able to handle all the situations that the neurotypical person had. The other thing you can see is this person's personality is highly skewed towards some specific traits which are very, very dominant, and they're ones that we would consider both the negatives and the positives of having Asperger's. So we have in the negative side unsociable, obsessive. Well, obsessive can be good if you're trying to get something done. Brilliant, obviously good. Moody, well, not so good a one. Rigid, definitely a description that fits somebody who tends to be on the Asperger scale. So you can see in this, what we're dealing with is the balance has shifted. There's less skills to draw from, and there's more specific skills that are the predominant aspects of the personality that comes through. Now, we'll move to the picture of somebody in the middle. And at this point, what do you say? Do they have the condition or do they not have a condition? You're starting to see here, there's a narrowing down, there's a little bit less of the whole range of skills, and there's a little bit more of particular skills becoming a larger piece of their personality. But at this point, it's not so over the top that you would say, hey, that person's a little strange and a little weird. This is what I personally refer to as having Asperger or neurodiverse type traits. And it shows where the difficulty becomes. At what point, if we just continue and you think through, we were to start taking from here and start taking away traits and cranking up a few other ones, at what point do they go from just being a very driven neurotypical to being somebody with Asperger's? I think this presents a completely different way to look at the Asperger's spectrum and to look at neurodiversity, and to recognize that neurodiversity is really just this entire whole range, when we deal with it, of going through from the neurotypical to the person in the middle to the heavy Asperger person. And all of that is neurodiversity. At each piece, they can bring something unique, a completely different way to look at the world, and a different way to process it and think about it. And by using those best ideas, the best thoughts that we have of the most brilliant minds, and combining it along with the best thoughts and practices and abilities of the rest of the minds, we can get this phenomenal strength that allows us to come together and support each other where we're weak, but depend on each other where we have these strengths that can just hold up for each other. So what can we do? How can we make this thing work? Well, first, you've just got to recognize that the mental toolkit that makes us better at different things makes us worse at other things. And you may have a toolkit that's just phenomenal at producing error-free work. You have a great skill at that. Well, I'm not so great on that skill. So if we were to work together, we'd be much better off than if I try to get better at doing what I do poorly, and you try to get better at what I do good, but you do poorly. So just recognize the toolkits change, so that means the skills change. Another thing is, accept that these different toolkits make us capable and incapable of different things. So this is even a step further. They become a complete process. It's much like when you take and put something into the computer. Different programs can do different things with different inputs. But if you take the same input and put it into multiple programs, you're going to get a variety of different outputs. And again, that's those different brains we have, except everybody, different toolkit, different outlook, different processing. Matter of fact, even when you speak to them, the words will have different meanings as it comes to them. So accept that, and accept in neurodiversity, you're going to run into a lot of people who are very, very literal. So take them for what they say, don't add to it. And lastly, learn to understand that everybody's abilities vary. While I happen to be able to communicate fairly well, which is, directly to you, looking right at you, a lot of people that have Asperger's can't do that. Maybe they're much better if you give them the opportunity to respond back in writing. So don't force a person to have to work in a mode that is not suited to them if you can give them some kind of alternatives. So in my realm, where I've worked quite a bit as a developer in the BI and database market, we often do stand-ups. And in stand-ups, every morning, the developers get together and have to real-time stand up and converse back and forth with each other on what's supposed to be just 3 questions. But if that's an area you have difficulty, you have a challenge with, then that standing up in the morning is going to demotivate you. It's going to make you an employee that's frustrated. You're going to be angry because you're being forced to do something that you're not comfortable doing. So how hard is it to adopt for that person, to give them the ability to maybe type up their notes and send an email to the Scrum Master ahead of time and let them read the notes for them? Or use one of the products that are designed to enable dispersed work groups to work together and to have scrums together or stand-ups together, and use those tools even though you're local. One of the wonderful ones out there is HipChat, which by Atlassian Software. And very nice product, and gives some very interesting approaches of how you can use these kinds of softwares to overcome some of the issues by treating the person in a way that gives them the environment they work in best, but in the way that works best for everybody. So maybe they work best as a remote type employee, but they can pick up a lot of knowledge by being around the office. So let them be remote while they're in the office so that they can accommodate where they have troubles, but you can get the best of their strengths. Well, that's about all I've got to tell you today. Kind of went on probably longer than I really thought I was going to, but really wanted to get into this whole concept of that neurodiversity is really more this idea of a cloud with all these different traits in here. And some of the traits are bigger and some of the traits are smaller and some of the traits are real tiny, and some people have lots and lots of little traits and some people have very few just big traits. And that really is probably a great model of neurodiversity to have in your mind. So Tim Goldstein, your neurodiversity communication expert. I sure hope this helped you. And if you want to know more, please just come to my website, timgoldstein.com. And you can get some extra information there. Reach out and contact me. Love to hear from you. Thank you very much. Bye now.